Hey there, tonight we're not going into battle. We're not trudging through muddy fields or whispering in candlelit chapels. We're heading somewhere warmer, louder, stranger, a medieval tavern. Not the polished, romantic kind you see in films, with gentle lutes and polished goblets, but the real thing. Sticky floors, smoky air, a fire that never quite heats the back wall, the scent of sweat, ale, spilt broth, and something fermenting in the corner that no one dares clean. It's the place where rules bend, where stories grow legs, where the line between laughter and violence is often just one bad joke away. And in the middle of it all, the jester, the fool, the buffoon. But don't let the motley fool you. These weren't just clowns, they were sharper than they looked. Observers, survivors, sometimes mocked, sometimes feared, always watched. So tonight, we're telling their stories. What did they say when the Lord wasn't listening? What secrets passed from table to table in slurred whispers and raucous rhymes? What really happened after the door was bolted and the laughter got mean? If this kind of quiet, immersive history helps you unwind, feel free to like the video and subscribe. And if you're still listening by the end, tell me in the comments. Where are you tuning in from, and what time is it where you are right now? It's oddly comforting to know that we're all sitting at the same long table of stories, even if the room around us is dark and silent. So grab a stool, keep your back to the wall, and don't laugh too loud. In here, even the jokes have teeth. Let's begin. The door closes and the masks come off. It starts with the sound of wood, a thick, iron-banded door groaning shut behind you. And then, all at once, you're inside. Not just inside the tavern, but inside something else. A different world. The kind that smells like old ale, damp wool, wood smoke, and pig fat. The kind that doesn't ask your name, just what you're carrying, what you're hiding, and whether you can pay. A fire cracks at the far end, not big, just enough to make shadows dance along the low rafters, and the faces beneath them blur at the edges. The walls lean inward. The floor is uneven, laid with thick boards that remember every spilled drink and every boot print. And the noise? It's a kind of human storm. Voices laughing too hard, arguing too quietly, someone singing a song half remembered from a summer that never felt real, dice rattling in a bowl, bread crusts thudding against tabletops, the dull clink of a coin sliding across a surface sticky with honey and blood. You take a step forward, and eyes lift, not all, just enough, a flicker of recognition, or suspicion, or hunger, because in this place people don't come to relax. They come to unmask. The man in the fine tunic, he's a thief. The stable boy in the corner, he's sharper than he looks. The woman pouring ale, she knows everyone's secrets, and sitting nearest the fire, sprawled across a stool like he owns it, even though he's been paid in bread and scraps, is a man in tattered red and yellow, bells on his hat, mud on his knees, one eye too bright, the jester, but not the kind that juggles fruit for kings. This one tells stories that make people uncomfortable, laughs too long at things that aren't funny, recites truths in rhyme so no one can accuse him of honesty. He's not here to entertain, he's here to watch. Every tavern has one. Some call him fool, some call him buffoon. Some say he used to work in a court before something went wrong, before he said one thing too true, and one lord too proud sent him running. Now he lives off the edges of things. Taverns, markets. The backs are carts, places where truth can be worn like a mask and discarded just as fast. Tonight, he's already halfway through his first tale. Something about a goat, a nun, and a bishop's missing ring. People are laughing, but not all of them, because in this place, jokes aren't just for humor, they're for hiding and hurting, and the night is just getting started. Where ale flows, tongues loosen. The ale isn't good, no one expects it to be. It's cloudy, sour, Warm enough to be suspicious, but it's strong and it's cheap, and most of all, it's available. In a world where water might kill you faster than a sword, this stuff is a blessing in disguise. And as it flows, the air changes, louder, looser, like someone loosened the seams holding the night together. Voices start to stretch. Stories spill across tables, exaggerated, broken, forgotten and remembered all at once. That soldier in the corner. He's been to Flanders 3 times now, each time more heroic than the last. The old woman near the hearth. She once cured a noble son with nettle broth, or so she says. No one doubts her. Because here, truth is flexible, especially after the 3rd cup. The jester leans in. Not to talk, just to listen. He doesn't drink much, he never does. You don't stay alive in places like this by dulling your edges too quickly. He hears the boy whispering about stolen grain. Hears the merchant laughing a little too loud when someone jokes about smuggling salt. Hears the baker mutter under her breath that the sheriff's wife hasn't paid for bread in 2 weeks. Nothing gets past him. Not a name, not a glance, not a sigh held 1 second too long. Because this tavern isn't just a place to rest. It's a net, and everyone in here is tangled in something. Secrets move faster than coin. You can trade gossip for supper. Trade a confession for a night without questions. Sometimes, a rumour dropped in the right ear will buy you more than gold ever could. That's why fools like this one last. Not because they're funny, because they know. They know when to laugh and when to fall silent. They know how to dance around danger without stepping in it. They know when to poke the fire and when to let the smoke do the talking. And as the night deepens, so does the blur of truth, of memory, of intention. Ale doesn't just loosen tongues, it unties the knots people keep inside. And in a medieval tavern, that's when things really begin to unravel. The fool who remembered too much. He wasn't always called Fool. Once, years ago, if you believe the whispers, he had another name, a longer one. Maybe with a Sir in front of it, maybe not. But it had weight, respect, the kind of name that sat straight in a chair and didn't get laughed at when it entered a room. But names are like bones. Break them the wrong way, and they never set right again. Now, he's the fool, or that filthy rhyme man, or if someone's in a generous mood, the one with the good stories. He doesn't mind. Names are just wrappers, he knows what he is. What's more dangerous is what he remembers. Tonight, it starts with a song, a low, sing-songy thing, half rhyme, half confession. He's pacing by the hearth, arms wide, teeth bared. His bells don't jingle, they've rusted stiff. But his voice carries. It's a song about a king's feast, where the meat was stolen and the wine was blood, where the jester served the guests truth disguised as pudding, and no one noticed until they were sick from it. Everyone laughs, except the man by the door. He shifts in his seat, his eyes narrow, his knuckles whiten around his mug, because he's heard the story before, or something close to it, and he knows that the fool isn't just telling fairy tales. He's pointing. The rhyme is a circle. It doesn't say names, but it describes a place, a date, a crime so subtle you could miss it if you weren't paying attention. The fool sees the man by the door flinch and he grins, wide, wicked, innocent. This is how he gets away with it, wrapped in rhyme, layered in laughter. You can't hang a man for telling a joke, even if the joke cuts closer to the truth than any dagger. This is why fools survived courtrooms, councils, and taverns alike. They were allowed to say the thing no one else could say, so long as they made it rhyme. But it's a thin line. One verse too sharp and the laughter stops. One word too close and the tankard turns into a weapon. Tonight, he walks that line with perfect balance. The crowd laughs. The man at the door stays seated. and the story ends without anyone bleeding. But tomorrow, maybe not, because in a place like this, memory is a weapon sharper than any blade, and a fool who remembers too much is always one stanza away from vanishing, when the laughter turns mean. At first it's harmless, a juggled loaf of bread, a joke about the man with no teeth, a bawdy rhyme shouted over a spilled drink. Everyone laughs, even the ones being mocked, especially them. Because in a tavern, if you can't laugh at yourself, someone will do it for you. But after the third round of ale, something changes. Laughter shifts. It grows sharper. It stops being shared and starts being aimed. The fool, of course, feels it first. He's used to the current of a room, can read it like a farmer reads weather in the sky. And tonight, he senses it moving, a little colder, a little hungrier. It starts when someone throws a crust of bread, then a smear of something wetter, something less friendly, and then the taunts begin. Not clever ones, just lazy, slurred insults hurled from the side of the room where the ale's been poured too fast and too deep. Hey, Jingle Hat, tell us a story about your mother's legs. Or your father's goat. Wait, maybe they're the same thing. More laughter. Louder now. The wrong kind. The fool's face doesn't change. Not yet. He leans against the fire, eyes narrowed, weighing the moment like a coin. Because this is the part of the night when stories die and fists wake up. The part when everyone's a little too bold. When pride starts limping toward danger. He could walk away. He's done it before, but not tonight. Tonight, he smiles, slowly, like a wolf remembering it still has teeth. And he starts to speak. Not a rhyme this time, not a song, just a story. Low, serious, with enough truth in it to silence the laughter. It's about a man who mocked the wrong fool, who ended up face down in a ditch, not from a blade, but from a lie the fool whispered to a bailiff 3 days later. And just like that, the room stiffens, because even drunks remember fear, especially the kind that hides behind grins. No one throws anything else. The mean laughter fades. The ale continues to flow, but with fewer toasts, fewer stares. The fool leans back against the wall. His eyes flick toward the rafters. He knows this part. He's lived it more times than he can count. In a tavern, laughter is currency, until it becomes a weapon. And the difference between the two is thinner than a knife's edge. The tale that shouldn't be told. Every tavern has one story. It's not written on the walls. No one carves it into the table. No bard sings it. But everyone knows it. Everyone feels it. And everyone agrees. It doesn't get told out loud. Not if you want to sleep with your throat intact. But tonight, the fool is drunk. Or maybe just pretending to be. It's hard to tell. His words slur a little, but his hands are too steady, his gaze too sharp, and when he climbs onto the low bench beside the fire, it's not a stumble, it's a choice. Want to hear a story, he says, louder than usual. A true one. A few heads shake, a few lean in. He doesn't wait for agreement. There was a lord, he begins, who had a cellar deeper than his soul and a daughter sharper than his sword. And one night, after the wine ran out, something happened. The room tightens. No one says the Lord's name, but they don't have to. He lives 3 miles from here. His men ride through the village twice a week. One of them might even be in the room right now, sitting in shadow, listening with a stillness that has nothing to do with interest and everything to do with watchfulness. But the fool keeps going. He talks about a jester locked in the stocks, about gold that changed hands in silence, about a baby that disappeared, and a chapel that suddenly had its doors nailed shut. The story is full of holes. That's on purpose. It lets each person in the tavern fill in the blanks, and they do. A farmer's grip tightens on his mug, A woman near the hearth won't make eye contact. The cook stops stirring the pot, listening with the same frozen stillness as someone hiding in tall grass. Then, suddenly, the fool laughs. Shrill, sudden. "But that's just a tale, of course," he shouts, loud enough to make the rafters ring. "Just a story for children. Let's drink." The room exhales, slowly, unevenly. The danger doesn't pass, it just shifts. The fool downs the last of someone else's ale and walks away from the fire. Bells dull against his neck. No one claps, no one speaks. Because sometimes the most dangerous thing you can hear in a medieval tavern isn't a threat, or a sword being drawn, or even a name whispered too loud. It's a story that isn't quite fiction, and a fool who knows exactly what he's doing. The jester's second face. There are two kinds of fools, the ones who laugh with you, and the ones who laugh at you. Tonight, the fire's low and the crowd has thinned. A few passed out at their tables, a few more whispering in corners, their secrets half shielded behind mugs and cloaks. The heat has drained from the room, but the tension hasn't. The jester sits alone, or so it looks. His legs are stretched in front of him. His hat droops over one ear. His mouth twitches at a joke no one else heard. But behind his eyes something else moves, a second face, quieter, harder, watching everything, because that's the secret of his kind. The smile is only the first mask. The real one lives underneath. He doesn't get drunk, he doesn't forget. He stores slights like coins, tallies debts in glances, in silences, in who looked away first. And when someone leans too close, like the burly man with scars and a voice like thunder who's asking what a fool really knows, he doesn't flinch. He tells a joke. It's about a butcher who put his cleaver in the wrong side of a pig. It's filthy, crude. The kind of joke that lowers defences, that gets a man to laugh so hard he spills his drink across the floorboards. The man wipes his eyes, slaps the jester on the back, and walks away, never knowing the joke was about him. That's how the jester survives. He doesn't swing fists, he swings stories, and the cut is slower, but deeper. It's why lords feared them, even as they dressed them in motley and gave them rings to kiss. Why soldiers didn't trust them. Why peasants tolerated them only because they needed someone in the room who could say the things no one else dared to. In the tavern, the jester plays his part. He falls, he juggles, he laughs louder than anyone. But when he's alone, he sharpens that second face like a blade. Because behind every fool, there's a man who learned how to make truth so funny. No one noticed the blood. The innkeeper's ledger isn't just for coin. He doesn't speak much. The innkeeper, broad-shouldered, hands like root vegetables, a face that's seen too many winters and not enough thanks. He doesn't laugh at the jester's jokes, doesn't sing, doesn't drink with the patrons, but he's always watching, and more importantly, he remembers everything. Not just who paid, not just who didn't, not just who slipped a coin under the bread plate or tried to trade salted fish for ale. He remembers what was said. The innkeeper's ledger isn't made of parchment and ink. It's written in nods, in glances, in names dropped by accident, in the way a traveller hesitates before saying where he came from, or doesn't, and when someone goes missing, he knows who saw them last. Tonight, he stands behind the counter, slowly wiping a mug that's already clean. Not because he's particular, but because the motion keeps people from thinking too hard about why he's always there. The fool knows better than to joke about him, because the innkeeper is the one person in the tavern who doesn't need to speak to be dangerous. He has memory, he has silence, and silence is currency. If a guard comes asking questions, he knows what to say, or what not to say. And if someone tries to stir trouble, starts getting too bold, too loud, too sure of themselves, the innkeeper doesn't shout. He tilts his head, And just like that, the mood changes. A chair gets pulled back. A voice lowers. The fool finds a different story to tell. Because everyone knows. When the man who runs the tavern stops pretending not to notice you, your night is about to change. He doesn't rule with a sword or a badge. He rules with debt, the kind that's never written down. And one day, when he asks something of you, you'll say yes, not because you owe him money, but because he knows what you said that night in the back booth when you thought no one was listening. The back room never asks questions. There's a door in every tavern that no one ever talks about. Not the front one, swinging open to every muddy traveller. Not the kitchen door, where steam and shouting spill out with every stew. The other one. Low, narrow, warped by damp, usually kept shut, sometimes locked. The back room. You'd miss it if you didn't know to look, if you weren't the kind of person someone invites through it. Because that's the thing, no one asks to go into the back room. You're called, or you're not. The fool has been in there. Not often, but enough. He doesn't talk about what he's seen, not directly, but he tells strange stories afterward. One's about men who wear shoes too clean to be from the village, about priests without parishes, about nobles who drink from wooden cups and keep their daggers too close to their bread. The back room isn't evil, it's useful. It's where quiet deals are struck, where letters change hands, where bandages are wrapped and names are forgotten, where someone who needs to vanish for a few hours or a few days finds just enough shelter not to ask too many questions. And sometimes it's where someone goes in and doesn't come out. The fool once saw a man walk in, proud and loud and flush with coin, a traveller from far away, dressed too fine for his own good. He made it past the main room, nodded to the innkeeper and vanished through the back door. 3 hours later, a different man walked out. Same height, same boots, different voice. No one said a word. The regulars don't ask about the back room, because it's not their business, because curiosity is expensive. The Jester once called it the room where names get laundered. He laughed when he said it. No one laughed back. In the tavern, the front room is for stories, for music, for noise. But the back room? That's where stories get rewritten, quietly, permanently, when the sheriff comes through the door. The room doesn't go silent, not immediately. That would be too obvious, too suspicious. But the laughter dims, the songs slow, the dice stop rolling, mid-game. The fool doesn't move, but his eyes narrow, his voice softens, his next rhyme just a bit more careful, because the sheriff has just stepped in. Not the kind with a golden badge and a heart full of justice. The medieval kind, heavy boots, a hard stare. Authority handed down from men who never set foot in this part of the village. And worse, he's sober. He surveys the room like a butcher picking out livestock. He's not here for a drink, not here for a story. He's here for a name or a debt or a body. He has 2 men with him, silent ones, armed but not obviously. They lean on the walls, but their eyes don't stop moving. The innkeeper doesn't flinch. Neither does the fool. They've seen him before. Maybe last week, maybe last year, maybe in another town, under a different banner, asking the same questions no one wanted to answer. The sheriff walks to the bar, speaks low. The innkeeper nods once, then steps aside. Now comes the test. The room must act normal. Laugh just loud enough. Sip just casually enough. Not too calm, but not panicked either. Because if the sheriff senses something, he'll stay. He'll dig. He'll break bones to get to truth. And maybe truth is sitting here tonight. Maybe it's the traveller who won't make eye contact. Or the farmer whose cart was found near a smuggler's path. Or the fool whose rhymes once danced too close to a lord's shame. But tonight, luck holds. The sheriff drinks nothing, takes no names, leaves with silence echoing in his place. Still, no one exhales until he's gone, because the sheriff doesn't need a reason to return, and if he does, the door won't open so gently next time. The night the lute went silent. It was the kind of silence you don't notice at first. A small one, barely a breath. The lute stopped playing, just for a second. But in a tavern like this, that means something. The lute belonged to a young man who never gave his name. Called himself Robin or Thomas or something just as forgettable. Hair too neat, fingers too clean, voice too smooth. You'd think he was a noble's son, pretending to slum it for sport, but the songs, they were good. Too good. Not just ballads and love songs. He knew new songs. Songs about lords whose banners had been pulled down. Songs about armies that weren't supposed to exist. Songs that named names. He played for coin, for beds, for supper. But really he played to be heard, and that's what got him into trouble. The fool warned him once. Pulled him aside with a crooked grin and a line that wasn't a joke. Be careful whose name dances on your strings. Some don't like the tune. But he didn't listen. That night, the lute went quiet after a single note. Just one. No mistake. Just stopped. Everyone noticed. No one moved. The young man stood slowly, confused at first. His fingers still hovered in the air like they weren't done yet, like they could rewind the moment and fix whatever had cracked. But nothing cracked. Something sank. A man at the back table, a face that hadn't smiled once all evening, stood up. Slow, careful, cloak too dry for the weather, boots too polished for the road. No words, just a glance, and then he left. The lute player sat back down. He didn't play again. The next morning, he was gone. No note, no bag, just a coin left on the windowsill, flattened at the edges, too old to spend. The fool didn't say anything, but that night he told a story about a bird that sang too beautifully, and how sometimes silence is the only safe song. No one clapped, because in a tavern like this, music is a gift until it becomes evidence, and the moment a string carries the wrong message, the silence afterward is the only thing anyone remembers. The game that never ends. It starts with dice, always dice. 2 carved bones smoothed by 100 palms, rolling across the table with the kind of clatter that makes even sober men flinch. The sound isn't loud, but it carries, like footsteps behind you in an empty alley. Tonight, they roll long. The players are quiet. 3 men and 1 woman. No names spoken. Just nods. Just looks. The kind of table where no one's playing for fun, but no one admits that either. The stakes aren't always coins. Sometimes it's favours, promises, secrets, land deeds. Bits of truth too sharp to say out loud, bartered like meat over a fire. And watching them at a nearby table is the fool. He doesn't play. He narrates, quietly, to no one in particular. A story murmured under his breath about a game between wolves disguised as lambs. About how one of them always cheats and one always bleeds, and one always walks away richer than they should. The players pretend not to hear him, but their eyes twitch at his timing, how his tale seems to match each roll, each turn, how every metaphor somehow points directly at someone's guilt. It's not magic, it's pattern. The fool sees things most miss, the way one player's foot taps when they lie, the way another keeps one hand under the table a beat too long, the way the woman keeps her drink full but never touches it. He doesn't call them out. That would be unwise, but he lets the story curl like smoke around them. A warning, a mirror, a joke that doesn't sound like one. And when the game ends, and someone stands too fast and someone else swears too softly, he's already halfway through a new tale about how games in taverns aren't really about winning, They're about revealing, because eventually someone always shows too much. A twitch, a boast, a threat wrapped in a smile. And that's when the real game begins. The one with no dice, no rules, no ending. The one that decides who walks home and who gets followed. The one-eyed man with too much gold. He came in just before the storm, one eye pale and cloudy, the other sharp as a whetted blade. His cloak was soaked, his boots caked with river mud, but what turned heads wasn't his smell, it was his coin. Too many coins, real silver, not clipped, not faked, enough to buy the whole room 3 rounds and not blink. He asked for wine, not ale, paid with a coin too large and waved off the change. The innkeeper didn't like it, the jester loved it, because a man who flashes wealth in a room full of desperation is either a fool, a ghost, or someone who wants to be followed. He didn't talk much, kept his back to the wall, but he listened, hard, the way hunters do. Every time a door opened, his hand slid an inch closer to the knife at his belt. No one knew him. No one dared ask where he was from. But by the time the fire burned down to orange coals, he'd heard every story the tavern had to offer. Who owed what? Who hated whom? Who might sell a brother for a handful of salt? And the fool? He circled like a cat, told a tale that night about a man who crossed rivers with silver sewn into his hem and a list of names burned into his memory. A man who smiled too little and paid too much. The one-eyed man didn't flinch, didn't laugh. But he tipped the fool a second coin before he went to bed. He left before dawn. No one heard him go. No hoof prints in the mud. No empty tankard on the table. Just that coin, still warm on the hearthstone, left where the fool could find it. And 2 nights later, a tax collector turned up dead in the next village. Poison. Clean. No one asked questions. No one said the man had one eye. But the fool told a new story the next night, about a ghost with silver for blood and knives for teeth, who wandered from town to town collecting sins with a smile. Everyone laughed, but no one touched the coin. The girl who danced with no shoes, she wasn't from here. That much was clear from the moment she stepped through the door, barefoot, cheeks flushed, hair wild as a story told too fast. She carried no pack, wore no cloak, and smiled like someone who'd never been told no. Some said she was running from a convent. Others said she was a ghost. The jester just called her interesting. She didn't ask for a drink. She asked for music. The old man in the corner strummed a lute, hesitant dry chords from cracked fingers, but she moved anyway, light as mist, sharp as a knife. She twirled on splintered floorboards like they were polished marble. Her feet bled within minutes, but she didn't stop. Not when the crowd gathered, not when the songs sped up, not even when the jokes turned cruel, because they always do. A woman dancing alone in a room full of men? That kind of story ends too many ways. Allée loosens thoughts. Thoughts loosen hands. Someone mutters something loud enough to test the air, but before anything changes, the fool steps forward, not with a threat, with a story. A tale about a girl who danced so well the devil asked her to marry him. She said no, so he took her shoes. She kept dancing, so he took her feet. Still she danced, on blood and bone and prayer. By the time the tale ends, the room has changed. No one laughs now. The girl has stopped spinning. She bows, not to the room, but to the fool, and then vanishes into the night. The next morning, her footprints are still visible outside the tavern, pressed into the cold mud, bare, delicate, and trailing off into the woods. Some say she never existed. Some swear they still hear dancing on stormy nights just outside the window. But the jester, he just shrugs. She owed no one, he says. That's why she scared them. because in a world where every face wears a debt, a woman who danced for nothing was the most dangerous thing of all. The night nobody spoke, it wasn't planned. No storm, no blood, no sheriff at the door. Just a silence that rolled in like fog, thick and sudden, and sat over the tavern like a woolen blanket pulled over the mouth of a scream. The fire crackled, the ale poured, the bread was broken. But no one said a word. Not the regulars. Not the drunk who always sang after the third mug. Not even the fool. Especially not the fool. He sat near the hearth, hat in his lap, lips tight, eyes distant, like he was somewhere else, like he was watching the shadows instead of the faces. Even the innkeeper didn't speak. He poured, he wiped, he moved. But the only sound was the wooden scrape of mugs and the low shift of breath, because earlier that day something had happened. Something just outside the tavern. Something no one could name. A cart overturned in the next village, some said. Others heard of a noble son found dead, body too clean for comfort. Still others whispered that a monk passed through and cursed the place without saying a word. But whatever it was, the room felt it. A tension like hunger, a stillness like mourning. And the fool, he knew better than anyone. This wasn't the night for jokes. This wasn't the time for clever rhymes or stories that pulled people into laughter. Not tonight. So he stayed silent. That was his power too, knowing when not to speak, when stillness spoke louder than 1,000 clever words. Hours passed. People drank slowly, ate cautiously, and one by one they left, nodding, not speaking, shutting the door behind them like they were sealing something inside. The fire died low. The fool stood, turned to the innkeeper, tapped his heart once, no words. The man nodded, and the fool walked out. No story that night, no song, just silence. And in a tavern that had known centuries of noise, that silence was the most chilling thing it had ever served. The bread that bought a life. There's an old superstition in this village. If someone gives you bread with both hands, without asking for coin, without looking you in the eye, you owe them something. Not a favour, not gratitude. Something deeper. The fool knows this. That's why tonight, when the fire is burning low and the crowd is restless, he walks to the corner table, the one where the boy sits, dirty-faced, too young to be alone, too quiet to be unnoticed. He hasn't touched his cup, hasn't joined the laughter. He watches the door like someone expecting to be found. The fool places a loaf of bread in front of him. Black bread, coarse, cracked at the top like river mud in drought, still warm from the hearth. Both hands, no words. The boy blinks. Once, then takes it. A moment passes. No one else sees it, or pretends not to. But the fool knows. The boy's not from here. His clothes say peasant, but the way he holds himself, too rigid, too careful, says trained. A squire maybe, or a page gone missing, maybe worse. Someone will come looking, with dogs, with coin, with questions. But now the fool owns a debt, a quiet one. He leans down, speaks in a whisper. Wait till the rooster, then go east. There's a cart with onions and mercy. Then he's gone. Later that night, when 3 armed men walk through the door, the fool tells a story. Loud, crude, distracting. About a nun, a barrel of fish, and a knight who couldn't count past 3. No one remembers the boy. By morning, the bread is gone. The chair is empty. The fool is asleep under the bench, hat over his face. He won't mention it again. But next week, a bag of dried apples appears near the back wall. No note, just a thank you, because in this tavern, a coin can buy you drink, a blade can buy you silence, but bread buys allegiance. The table that's always reserved, it's not marked, no sign, no rope, no rules, but everyone knows you don't sit there. It's the table in the corner, square, rough-hewn, one leg shorter than the rest, so it wobbles unless you know how to lean. covered in nicks and candle wax and the faint red stain of something spilled years ago. And it's always empty, until it's not. The fool calls it the king's table. Not because a king ever sat there, but because power does. Tonight it's empty. But 5 nights ago, a man in a black hood sat there for exactly 27 minutes. He spoke to no one, drank nothing, laid a folded piece of parchment on the table and left. No one touched the paper. The next morning, it was gone. Last month, a woman in a fur-lined cloak with a silver ring on every finger sat there and asked one question. Who here sells truth? No one answered. But 2 people left within the hour and haven't returned since. The table sees things. Deals made without words. Names passed in scraps. Letters burned before they're read. And always, always, the people who sit there don't stay long. The innkeeper never glances at it. The fool watches it like a weather vane. Because when someone sits at that table, it means a change is coming. A new lord. A missing person. A tax no one expected. A rebellion that hasn't yet put on its boots. The tavern doesn't talk about the table, but it remembers. The jester once told a story about it. A little too loud, a little too late. Said the table was carved from gallows wood, and it only speaks to those who've escaped the rope once already. No one laughed. Since then, he keeps the story to himself. Because in a place where most things are said too loudly, the quietest table holds the loudest secrets. And if you ever find yourself invited to sit there, say no. Unless you've already buried your name, the coin with no king's face. It shows up every now and then, slipped into a stack of silver, left behind under a plate, tossed into the fool's hat during a particularly risky rhyme. It's a coin, round, heavy, real enough to bite, but there's no king on it, no crest, no motto, just a blank face on one side, and a symbol, etched so shallow you can barely see it, on the other, a tree with 7 roots, upside down. It doesn't belong to any realm. No mint claims it, no tax collector recognizes it, and yet, everyone in the tavern knows what it means. The last time it appeared, 3 people left the room before finishing their drinks. One man spilled his ale, another pulled his hood lower and started whispering in a tongue that wasn't local. The fool, he picked it up without blinking, turned it over once, twice, then slid it beneath a floorboard with the kind of care most men reserve for sharp things. The coin isn't cursed, it's an invitation, a message, the kind passed between people who trade in more than gold, who serve no crown but move faster than any law. Spies, maybe. Assassins, possibly. Whispers in dark robes and darker intentions, certainly. The fool calls them the rooted. He tells stories about them sometimes when the fire's hot and the ale's deep. About men who speak in riddles and women who vanish into trees. About debts paid in scars and promises buried in bone. People say he's mad, but no one touches the coin, because in this world, money speaks. But this coin listens, and if you spend it, it doesn't just buy bread or silence or favours, it buys attention. And attention in a place like this can get you fed, or get you followed. The man who spoke in riddles and paid in blood. He came with the fog, not through the front door but from the back. Through the alley no one sweeps. Past the barrels no one opens. No one saw him enter. But when the fire popped and someone turned their head, he was already sitting at the hearth. Dry cloak, clean boots, voice like gravel soaked in wine. He didn't order food, or drink, or speak at first. Just listened. The fool noticed. Of course, he always notices. Something about the way the man sat. Too still, too quiet. The way his eyes didn't rest on people, but through them. Then slowly the man began to talk. Not in stories, not in boasts, in riddles. "Tell me," he said, loud enough to carry, "what is both never born and always buried, feeds kings and beggars alike, and dies the moment it's spoken." Someone laughed. Another cursed. Someone muttered, "Madman." The fool smiled, then without a word walked over and whispered the answer. The man nodded, stood, drew a knife. No one screamed, because the knife didn't go into anyone's back. It went across his own palm, deep and clean. Blood pooled. Not dripping, but thick, controlled. He let it fall onto the hearthstone. One drop, then another, then 3 more in a perfect line. Then he left. No one followed, but in the morning the blood hadn't dried. The fire had gone out, and the stones beneath the hearth were cracked. The fool wouldn't explain it, just said, "Some questions aren't asked for answers, they're asked for permission." And when someone tried to clean the blood, the rag turned black, crumbled in their hands. The hearth hasn't burned right since. Now, every few months, someone mentions a man in the fog, a riddle that shouldn't be answered, a wound that wasn't for pain but for passage, and the fool, he just hums to himself and waits, because some visitors don't need shelter, they need reminders. The mirror behind the bar, that no one looks into. It's not big, roughly polished, framed in old iron, cracked once in the corner like it caught a lie too sharp to hold, mounted just behind the bar, above the shelves of clay cups and the string of dried garlic that no one remembers hanging. Most taverns don't have mirrors. Too expensive, too fragile, too honest. But this one has always been there. People avoid it, not consciously, just quietly. Their eyes slip past it like water running around a stone. The innkeeper never wipes it, never glances up. And the fool? He looks into it often, but never at himself. They say the mirror doesn't show reflections. Not really. It shows reminders. You see yourself, but not how others see you. You see something closer, something more true. The old man who sits near the fire swears it once showed him with blood on his hands he hadn't spilled yet. A farmer saw her fields burning. A merchant saw a face behind his own. One man laughed at it. A loud man, full of meat and coin and noise. He leaned across the bar, pointed at the mirror and shouted, "Is that supposed to scare me?" He laughed again. Then he blinked, and his laughter stopped. No one saw what he saw, but he left his purse behind and ran into the night. Never came back. The mirror doesn't speak, it doesn't glow, but every now and then it flickers, just once, just enough. And when it does, the fire dims, the tavern tilts. The fool goes quiet for a beat longer than necessary, because in a place built on lies and shadows, truth is unwelcome. And the mirror, it doesn't ask for truth, it gives it, whether you're ready or not. The night the jester didn't come back. There's a rhythm to tavern life. Voices rise, drinks spill, stories circle. Someone leaves angry, someone stays too long. But no matter what else happens, the fool is always there. Until the night, he wasn't. At first, no one noticed. The fire was hot. The ale flowed. A new traveller had taken up the lute. The noise filled the spaces he usually did. Jokes, rhymes, songs that made people laugh harder than they meant to. But when the sheriff passed through and didn't get mocked, when the quiet girl near the hearth looked up and didn't blush, when a name got said out loud and no one turned it into a joke, they realized something was missing. Someone asked the innkeeper. He just shrugged. Didn't see him. The mirror behind the bar flickered. Someone checked under the bench where he usually slept. Nothing but a torn bit of red cloth, the bell still stitched to the corner. The table in the corner was empty, the back room locked. No riddles, no warnings, just a silence. It stretched long into the night, and then, near dawn, someone found something outside, half buried in the mud behind the stables, a mask. Not a jester's cap, just a face, wood, painted, split down the middle, one half laughing, one half crying. No one claimed it, no one touched it. The innkeeper buried it behind the hearth without a word. The tavern kept going, of course. It always does. New songs, new strangers, new stories. But every now and then, when the fire is low and the laughter stumbles, someone says a line that sounds just like him. A rhyme that cuts too deep, a joke that comes too fast. And the room goes still, because some say he didn't die. He just became part of the tavern, the ghost of the punchline, the breath between verses, the truth too clever to name. And in a place like this where stories never die, neither do jesters. And now the candles are low, the stools are empty, the fire has gone to ash, the stories have been told, the laughter has faded, and the jester, well, maybe he's still here, sitting quiet in the corner, or tucked behind the door you didn't notice. That's the thing about medieval taverns. They weren't just places to drink. They were maps of the world in miniature. Rooms where lords and beggars, thieves and pilgrims all crossed paths without ever meaning to. They were courts without laws, chapels without saints, and theatres with no stage but a table and a fool who knew when to speak and when to watch. If you're still with me, thank you. If this helped you unwind or drift towards sleep, I'm glad. That's the quiet magic of slow history, the kind that lingers like smoke in old wood. If you like the journey, feel free to like the video and subscribe for more. And if you're still awake, tell me, where are you listening from, and what time is it right now? I always find it oddly comforting to imagine this strange little tavern, built not of stone but of shared imagination, stretching out across time zones and oceans. All of us, huddled by the same hearth, even if only in our minds. So rest easy. Let the laughter echo a little longer in your head. Let the stories follow you gently into sleep. The tavern will still be here tomorrow, and maybe the fool will be too.